Welcome back to another episode of Infinite Podcast. Now, Simon, boot camps in eSports, they're like a double-edged sword, right? They sculpt these players for competitions, pushing them hard. But how do the coaches make sure they're not pushing them into burnout territory? I've seen players just crumble under that pressure.
Oh, burnout is the real final boss, isn't it? It's all about balance. Coaches got to be like those old kung fu masters, knowing just when to push and when to say, hey, chill with some tea or something. I mean, I've seen players who are so fried, they can't tell a joystick from their elbow. Mental games got to be as strong as thumbs for these folks.
Absolutely, Simon. Reminds me of this time I joined a one-week intensive language learning course. Day one, full steam ahead, I was nailing it. But by day four, my brain felt like mashed potatoes. The instructor noticed and switched gears, made sessions interactive with games and breaks. By the end of the week, I could actually speak without mixing up my nouns and verbs. It's crazy how slowing down can sometimes mean you learn faster. Players in boot camps need that breathing room too.
Oh, totally. Like your brain became mashed potatoes, so then it turned into that delicious dish after bake time. See, I reckon sometimes these boot camps go soft. Sure, breaks are good, but this is esports. It's hardcore, or at least it should be. You gotta learn to swim by jumping in the deep end, right? Maybe your language class needed a boot camp day 5. No breaks, just talk, to really seal the deal.
Yeah, I get your point. There's a fine line between tough training and overkill, isn't there? No pain, no gain, as the old saying goes. Maybe for serious competitors, having a no-breaks kind of day does offer that high-pressure experience needed for big tournaments. That heat of the moment, it either forges you into steel or melts you down. We just hope these players come out sharper, not on the verge of snapping.
So, Joe, do you think there's a particular sign coaches should watch for, like an early red flag, that signals a player is heading towards burnout?
Sure thing. In the esports realm, there's this thin ice that coaches can feel cracking if they're tuned in. Mood changes in players. When normally upbeat players get snappy or quiet ones go mute, alarm bells should ring. Physiologically, things like chronic fatigue or even repetitive strain injuries are giant red flags. Sleep patterns matter too. Messed up sleep means something's up. A smart coach has to monitor these indicators rigorously because, unlike traditional sports, esports mental strain isn't as visible. It creeps up on you, silent but deadly.
Oh, sleep's the big one. Dozing off mid-match? Might as well wave the white flag. Coaches need to slap on some shades because those red flags ain't invisible. Everyone just needs to chill before they flatline their game face.
Shades might help with the glare, Simon, but some coaches love turning up the heat just before it goes nuclear. I've got to disagree about everyone needing to chill. If you cool down too much, you'll lose your edge. Think about it. The best players often walk that line where they're revved up and laser focused, but not tipping into burnout. So instead of hitting the brakes whenever there's a bit of stress, maybe what we need is to teach players how to manage that stress. Turn it into fuel, not flatline their game face. Otherwise, aren't we just babying our champions? Isn't part of being pro learning to handle the heat without having someone turn on the AC every time you sweat?
So, Joe, you're all about riding that edge. Do you think with the right kind of stress management techniques, any player can learn to handle the pressure cooker without needing a cool down, or is there a certain type that thrives under those conditions?
Definitely not just any player, Simon. It's like this. You've got stones that crack under pressure and diamonds that form out of it. Each player's different. Some thrive when the heat is cranked up because they're wired to handle high-stakes tension. Others might have the talent but can crumble unless you ease them into it. So yeah, with the right techniques, visualization, controlled practice scenarios, maybe even some good old-fashioned deep breathing exercises, a lot of players can get better at handling stress. But let's be real. There are those natural-born competitors who live for the adrenaline rush. They don't learn to handle it. They already love it. Coaches, their job's figuring out who needs what to push limits without crossing lines.
A coach has got to be part psychologist, part strategist then. Tailor the approach or risk breaking the player. Know your team, know their limits, and push just right. Diamonds or stones, eh? Guess it's all about polish and pressure.
Absolutely, Simon. It's like this old car I used to have, a real beater. The thing is, that car got me from A to B okay, but anytime I pushed it too hard, say on a long uphill drive, it'd start complaining with these weird noises and shudders. Lesson learned: you'd eke out the best performance by knowing exactly how far you could push before it'll conk out. Applying that to coaching esports players, it's all about reading those early warning signs. With my car, I knew when to downshift or let up off the gas for a bit to prevent a breakdown. Coaches, they need to do the same with their players. Find that sweet spot between pressure and performance without pushing them to the point of breaking down. It's the subtle art of tuning, whether cars or competitors.
Yeah, but Joe, aren't we coddling these players a tad too much by always comparing them to delicate machines? It's boot camp, not a day at the spa. We're talking battle-hardened keyboard warriors who signed up to grind. Sure, everyone's got a limit, but finding it shouldn't involve kitty gloves. Crank that stress dial. See who steps up and who taps out. Isn't that what separates the champs from the chumps, throwing some real curveballs and watching them swing?
Can't argue with that, Simon. You've got a point. Competition isn't for the faint-hearted. Still, maybe there's a middle ground. Let's not go swinging wrecking balls when a chisel will do. Find their limit, yes, but it doesn't have to be in binary, champ or chump. We want them in the zone, ideally, the place where they're challenged and growing without flaring out. 'Cause here's the thing. Push too hard without rhyme or reason, you risk losing good players who just needed a smarter approach. It's about striking that balance between the grind and giving room to breathe.
You've got it, Joe. Strike while the iron's hot, but don't melt the anvil. You find that sweet spot, and you're golden. So what's the take on this balance for our listeners who are grinding away in their own boot camps? How do they keep from burning out while still sharpening those skills to a fine edge?
That's vital advice for those pushing the limits out there. And speaking of pushing limits and finding that sweet spot, Simon, it leads us right into the art of strategy in these high-stakes games. Coaches aren't just managing burnout, they're masterminding victories. You know, in traditional sports and even old-school warfare, it was all about how you play your best hand, like chess with sweat. Looking at eSports, some game-winning moves become legendary, almost folkloric. They're engineered by coaches who've got to balance super-tight strategies with their players' skill. It starts to blur lines. When does a coach's playbook end and raw talent take over? And hey, let's not forget the ethical side of competitive tactics. Some coaches really dance in those gray areas to bag a win.
Totally, the chessboard's set by the coach, but it's up to the players to make the moves. Considering those epic strategies that have flipped games on their heads, do you think it's the mastermind coach or the execution by the players that truly clinches the victory?
Tough call, Simon. It's like baking the perfect cake. Yeah, you need a killer recipe. That's your coach's strategy. But if the baker, the player, botches the execution, you're not winning any blue ribbons. Remember that epic base race call in StarCraft 2? Or the gutsy dragon steal in League of Legends? Genius moves from the coaches, sure, but without players who execute flawlessly under pressure, they're just cool ideas that never made the highlight reel. So to me, it's a symbiotic win. The coach is the brain coming up with those strats. But victory? That's in the hands of the player at the keyboard nailing every sequence. Each piece relies on the other. It's a duet, not a solo.
You're dead on. It's a duet. But here's a curveball. What if the players are so good they don't even need those highfalutin strategies? Like, think about it. They say talent always wins out in the end. Sure, a coach can make a battle plan, but toss in a couple of gaming prodigies, and suddenly it's less about the play calls and more about raw, unscripted brilliance. And let's not skate over the whole playing dirty debate. If victory comes from veering into those ethical gray zones, doesn't that tarnish the win? Coaches gotta walk a tight line between cunning strategy and fair play. It's a wild world out there in the digital coliseum, my man.
Hey listeners, you've just tuned into a spicy debate on the strategies that shape victories in esports. Simon and I have been chewing over whether it's the coach's master plan or the player's raw talent that truly grabs the W. We agree. It's a duo that clinches the deal. Clever coaching plus killer execution. Also, we've touched on how tricky it can be for coaches to play fair yet fierce. Yes, wins matter, but they gotta keep it clean. In the end, our digital gladiators need both. The brains behind the plays and the brawn at the controls to raise that trophy overhead. So it's like a two-player game where both need to be on their A game. One can't dominate the victory lap.
So if the coach is baking a cake and the players gotta ice it, you better hope they're not just lobbing sprinkles from across the kitchen and calling it gourmet. Nope, in eSports, we're talking Great British Bake Off finals every match. No soggy bottoms allowed, or you get served.
Absolutely, Simon. Precision is key. And on that note, do you think there's still room in modern esports for those wild, off-the-cuff plays that defy even the best coach's game plan? Or has the industry evolved beyond the point of sprinkle-throwing spontaneity?
Spontaneity? In the age of data and analytics, those wild plays are like finding a payphone, rare. Today's scene is about controlled, practiced moves that mesh together like clockwork. Just winging it? That's how you become a cautionary tale, not a champ. If you aren't executing a well-oiled strategy, good luck standing against teams that have their act down to a science. Sure, adaptability's key, but foundational team strats, they're the bedrock now. Off the cuff is off your game, my friend.
Yeah, Simon, the payphone analogy hits home. Today's esports scene is a complex ecosystem where analytics and meticulously crafted strategies reign supreme. There's less room for impromptu genius when you're up against players who eat, sleep, and breathe their roles with military precision. But even in this climate, the greatest coaches leave space for adaptability, allowing players to pull a rabbit out of the hat when the game throws them a curveball. It's not about stray sprinkles. It's knowing when to add that secret ingredient that no amount of preparation could anticipate. That blend of rigid strategy and fluid creativity, that's the sweet spot in modern esports.
But come on, Joe, let's not get too cozy with the status quo. How about those times when sticking to the playbook is akin to playing dead? We've seen underdogs upset giants, not by following scripts, but by rewriting them on the fly. Isn't that the magic of competition? The fact that despite all odds and algorithms, a moment of unscripted brilliance can flip the entire game. Adaptability, creativeness, surely these are the trump cards in any coach's deck. Rattle your opponent with a wildcard play and watch their well-oiled machine grind to a halt.
I'm with you on shaking things up, Simon. True mastery in coaching is not just following a script. It's also about cultivating those moments where players can seize an opportunity and turn the tables. It's like boxing. Stick to the combos you practiced, sure, but when you see that opening, you take the shot. Histories of esports are littered with game-changing plays, the fountain hook in Dota 2 or the X-Peaky backdoor in LoL. Those moments shattered expectations because teams went off script at the perfect time. That's the magic. A coach who encourages innovation within structure gives their team the chance to morph from predictable to phenomenal.
So, Joe, do you think it's the ability to improvise that separates the good teams from the true legends in esports?
Absolutely, Simon. In the niche of esports where strategies can be studied and emulated, what sets legends apart is often their ability to innovate on the fly. It's that punch no one saw coming. A legendary team takes a coach's strategy as a base, but thrives by knitting in moments of pure adaptive gold. And it's no fluke. It's a skill developed through intense practice and a deep understanding of the game mechanics. The coach unlocks this potential, designing not just plans, but players who can pivot when it counts. That fusion of discipline and improvisation creates the memorable moments we rave about. Real Hall of Fame stuff.
For sure, Joe, the pivot's crucial. But let's not hand over all the props to spur-of-the-moment genius. Let's face it, a coach sweating over strategies and plays, that's their magnum opus. Players who improvise are like jazz musicians. They can riff because they know the tune inside out, thanks to the coach drilling it into them. I'd argue that even those legendary off-script moments are rooted in a solid game plan. The Hall of Fame is built on foundations laid down by strategic masterminds. You know, the puppeteers pulling the strings, even when it looks like the puppets have gone rogue.
Exactly, Simon. Those off-the-cuff plays are often the crescendo of a symphony meticulously composed by a great coach. So while the spotlight hits the player in that moment of glory, let's not forget the architects behind the scenes, the coaches whose blueprints for victory allow players to extemporize like virtuosos. Now, listeners, this is just scratching the surface on how coaches engineer victories. It makes you wonder, what else goes into creating those winning moments we never forget?
Speaking of those behind-the-scenes moments that make a team, I heard about some of the hilarious rituals eSports squads have. Like this one team that does a pre-match chicken dance. Can you believe it? Coaches say it's not just for laughs. It actually chills them out before game time. It's these inside jokes and lighthearted traditions that glue a team together, keeping things breezy even when stakes are sky high.
Chicken dance, huh? Now that's a sight I'd pay to see before a high-stakes match. These quirky rituals show the human side of esports, far from the pixel wars on screen. You're spot on about the relax factor. Laughter is a proven stress buster. I recall one squad with a lucky hat several sizes too small. Every member tries it on before they play. It's more than just superstition or a chuckle, it's their shared talisman. These practices, silly as they might be, become part of a team's signature, something fans and competitors alike come to expect. It's a blend of team spirit and branding, coached into an inside joke.
Lucky hat? Ha! What if they lose, though? Do they pass the blame onto that cranium-crushing cap? Here's what gets me. Are these rituals keeping the team loose or just a comic relief from the pressure cooker of esports? Sure, it's branding gold and fan candy, but does chucking Lucky Charms into your game plan actually mess with player focus? You've got coaches knee-deep in playbooks, and then, bam, chicken dances and tiny hats. Let's not forget the pranks that could backfire and lead to legendary mishaps. Like, oops, wasn't that our star player who got short-sheeted before the finals? It makes you wonder about the fine line between building morale and courting mayhem.
You know, Simon, that brings me back to this classic match. Huge tension, the works. Before going on stage, one team decided to switch up their usual pep talk with a prank. They replaced a teammate's energy drink with a fizzy, ultra-sour concoction. Talk about a taste shock. It got laughs all around and surprisingly pumped up the energy levels. Cut to the game, and they played out of their minds, sharp, focused, and took the win. It was like that jolt of unexpected sourness set them up for the unpredictability of match play. Point being, those playful stunts can sometimes spark just the right kind of fire in a team. You want morale? That day, a prank spelled cohesion and, strangely enough, razor-sharp attention as the action unfolded.
Hey Joe, that fizzy drink prank is a gem. But tell me, do you think these pranks and rituals could distract players from the game? Or does it actually enhance their performance by lightening the mood and tightening team bonds?
Well, Simon, rituals can cut both ways. When you've got players laser-focused, a poorly timed joke or an out-of-place prank can shatter that concentration like thin ice. You might lighten the mood, but you risk tipping the balance and causing a slip-up when stakes are high. Why is this viewpoint valid? Pressure shapes diamonds, and esports athletes often thrive under that pressure. It's a delicate balancing act for any coach. Too much levity and you soften that edge. Lose the intensity that's key to clutch performances. Those inside jokes and traditions need to be timed right, infused thoughtfully, so they enhance rather than detract from the game day mindset.
Absolutely, Joe. It's like walking a tightrope. You need the right moment for comedy to strike without toppling anyone over. I mean, imagine if the pre-game chicken dance becomes the pre-loss chicken curse in the fans' eyes. Not exactly the kind of legend you want. But when done right, these inside jokes can be like secret handshakes that bond players tighter than superglue. Coaches grapple with stats and stratagems day in, day out. Weaving in some harmless tomfoolery could be that secret sauce keeping teams limber, both in spirits and in strategy. Just got to make sure it doesn't turn them into laughing stocks instead of esports rock stars, right?
Hey, new listeners, welcome aboard. We've been diving into the lighter side of esports, the way teams use inside jokes and wacky rituals to bond and bust stress, like pro squads performing pre-match chicken dances or trying on a lucky pint-sized hat. Sounds crazy, but it's all about keeping spirits up before battling it out in the digital arena. We've been batting around whether these antics help or hinder focus during competitions. Imagine practicing hardcore, then doing the chicken dance. It's serious business wrapped in comic relief that can turn a group of players into a united front, as long as it doesn't backfire and become a distraction. That's the tightrope coaches walk, harnessing humor to forge a fierce team identity. Join the fun as we unriddle the rituals that make eSports squads tick.
You nailed it, Joe. In the pressure cooker of esports, a bit of levity can be that release valve teams need. From chicken dances to sour drink pranks, these goofy traditions might just be the secret ingredient to top-tier performance. But hey, what other crazy team rituals are out there? Listeners, if you've heard of any, shoot us a message. We'd love to hear about the quirky ways your favorite squads gear up for the big game.
Hey, laughing our way through rituals got me thinking about the maestros behind those team traditions, the visionaries you don't always see making headlines. These are the coaches who build enduring powerhouses in esports, establishing dynasties that go beyond one-hit wonders toward legendary status. Picture this, a coach who's more than just a strategist. They're the glue that holds the team across iterations, transforming fresh rookies into seasoned pros. These unsung heroes shape not just careers but lives, imparting wisdom that echoes off-screen. We talk game strats all the time, but let's zoom out and celebrate these guiding lights. Simon, what do you reckon makes for a legacy-worthy coach in the chaos of competitive gaming?
Yeah, Joe, these coaches may be the bedrock of a team's culture and success, but let's not put them on too high a pedestal. Not every squad needs a Yoda with a playbook. Sometimes what makes a dynasty isn't just the guiding hand of a single mentor figure, but rather the collective efforts of everyone involved, players, analysts, and support staff. I'd argue that while a legacy-worthy coach can offer a wealth of knowledge and stability, an esports dynasty thrives on innovation and adaptability. Success comes when every member is empowered to bring fresh ideas to the table. Sure, a seasoned coach has their merits, but sometimes sticking too much to one vision can stifle evolution. Teams that last learn to embrace change, even if it means stepping out from under the coach's wing.
I hear you, Simon, but let's flip that script. While a collective effort is crucial, the story changes when a team hits a rough patch. That's when a coach becomes more than a strategist. They're a beacon in the storm. You've got teams that shoot to fame quickly but then fizzle out. It tends to be those with a compass, those legendary coaches that navigate through and write history. Change is good, but without a steady hand, it can be like swapping the engine while racing. Keeps things interesting though, doesn't it?
Sure, Joe, stellar teams might blaze up and vanish like shooting stars, but those dynasties, they've got coaches who double as lighthouses guiding ships through rough seas. A true visionary always has one eye on the horizon, ready to adjust the sails. Change is part of the journey, sure. But it's their enduring insight and grounded presence that steadies the team. These gurus don't just design plays, they craft the playbook for life. They're the roots allowing talent to grow and stand firm when winds of change try to rip them out. So yeah, a dynasty needs innovation, but an exceptional coach ensures legacies aren't left to chance. They're built with purpose.
Absolutely, they're the roots. But let's chop down that tree for a second. The landscape of esports is constantly shifting. New games become the rage, old ones fade out, and so must the dynasties tied to them. Even the wisest coach can't future-proof a team when the game they dominate retires. Here's the rub. Focusing on one visionary's legacy can blinker a team. What happens when the coach hangs up their headset? If everything hinges on their know-how, you risk having a dynasty crumble like a house of cards the moment they step back. Sure, they shape lives, but without fostering self-sufficiency in players, coaches might be unwittingly scripting the end of an era rather than the beginning of a legacy. It's adapt or become history, legends included.
Well, Joe, this takes me back to my old high school basketball team. We had a coach, Coach Thompson. This guy was like the Gandalf of local high school hoops. He took our ragtag bunch and turned us into county champs 3 years running. His plays, his speeches, it was all legendary. But then Coach T retired, and guess what? The team didn't implode. Why? Because he taught us to lead ourselves. By the time he left, we didn't just have a playbook, we had a whole philosophy. Every single one of us became mini coaches on that court. It's that kind of long-term vision, a coach embedding resilience and adaptability into the DNA of the team that leaves a true mark, even in eSports. It's about mentoring leaders, not just followers.
Welcome to those just joining us. We've been unpacking the role of coaches in shaping esports dynasties. Not just game winners, but lasting legends. These aren't your average shot callers. Think more like life coaches with a killer understanding of the meta. We've danced around whether the success of an esports team hangs solely on the shoulders of a coach, or if it's a group jam session where everyone plays a part. Sure, a great coach can shape a team's dynamic, leaving a legacy that echoes beyond their tenure. But what really etches a dynasty in the stone is when players evolve into self-leaders, thanks to those very mentors. Thus, the unsung heroes of esports give teams not just a strategy for the game, but a mantra for growth, a philosophy that breeds champions on and off screen, ensuring the squad's spirit lives on long after they've logged off. Join us as we tip our hats to these guiding stars of gaming.
Speaking of guiding stars, Joe, it's like the wild stories of rock bands on tour. The manager keeps the show on the road, but it's the band's collective mojo that makes each concert legendary. Same with esports. Coaches lay down the tracks, but it's the players jamming together that turn those notes into anthems for the ages.
Right on, Simon. Think of legendary coaches like Homa from the League of Legends scene, synonymous with SKT T1's triad of world championship wins. But it wasn't just his strategies. He imprinted a mindset, the famed T1 culture of continuous improvement and discipline that players carried into every skirmish. Or consider Coach Park Krusty Day leading the San Francisco Shock to back-to-back titles in the Overwatch League. It's all about sustainable skill building, not just quick trophy grabs. These icons foster environments where team synergy and individual growth go hand in hand, like rock bands refining their sound, cutting albums that stand the test of time. In esports, it's the same gig. Blend creativity with consistency, and you're tuning up for triumphs that resonate across generations.
For sure, Joe. Icons like Homa and Krusty, they didn't just cook up a flash-in-the-pan fad. They were like master chefs slow roasting their secret sauce over years. It's that long game of developing winning habits and instilling a rock-solid team ethos that cultivates dynasties. Even away from the bright screens and cheering crowds, these coaches are writing epic chapters in esports history books, a narrative about empowering players to not just compete, but dominate, transcending immediate glory for enduring greatness. Now, I wonder, who will be the next visionary to step into the limelight and what legacy they'll write with their teams?
Talking about these legendary coaches and their lasting impact, it's not just the victories in game that count. These dynasties, they're shaping more than player skills. They're helping sculpt the whole esports ecosystem. Because each win, every tournament they conquer, spins the wheels of this huge industry machine. From ticket sales at packed arenas to those eye-popping sponsorship deals that crop up when a team's hot, these factors all fuel the economic engine of esports. It's fascinating, really, how entry fees, exclusive broadcast rights, and even merch can be strategic plays for teams and organizers alike, hiring visionary coaches being one piece of that larger puzzle. Let's break down the coin behind the keyboards, the cash flow supporting those smoking servers. Because the esports ecosystem isn't just binary code, it's big bucks and smart stadiums. How do all these revenue streams stack up to forge an empire? Simon, what's your take on the cash game here?
Oh yeah, totally. Let me lay some background here. When you look at a behemoth like the International for Dota 2, the prize pots are crowdfunded and massive. We're talking millions. But that's just the sparkly bit that gets everyone hyped. Behind the scenes, there's serious money movement. Entry fees are the tip of the iceberg. Most of the funds come from those deep-pocketed sponsors who drop big bucks because they know gamers love brand loyalty. And let's not forget streaming rights. Platforms pay top dollar to broadcast because eyeballs equal ad revenue. Merchandise, That's continuous cash flow with jerseys and mousepads flying off shelves. Put all those pieces together: sponsorships, broadcast deals, merch, and it's clear every click in the arena grows into a thunderous roar of ka-ching for investors savvy enough to bet on the right team. Each win is a signal boost for profits. Think of it this way: each headshot, every last-minute save, isn't just good sports, it's great business.
Fascinating, right? It's almost like every frag in a match jingles change into someone's piggy bank. The synergy between competitive clout and commercial success is what sets the kings apart from the pawns in the eSports kingdom. So while players are grinding levels and strats, there's a parallel Game of Thrones playing out on the financial leaderboards.
Absolutely, and it blows my mind every time. But think about this: the real power play? When fans buy a skin or some loot tied to their favorite team, they get to flash their colors in-game while teams cash in, literally. It's like the golden snitch of esports finance. Grab that, and you've won way more than just the match.
Sure, skins and loot are golden geese for teams, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. It sounds like a bonanza, but focusing too hard on the merch can backfire. Ever seen a team's gear collecting dust on store shelves because their performance tanked? That swag's suddenly worth zip. Merch is volatile. It's fashion, it's trends, it's as fickle as fan loyalty. And about those sponsorships and broadcast deals, they aren't just free money showers, it's performance pressure in disguise. Esports execs might be counting dollar signs with every headshot, but players, they're sweating bullets knowing one slip could mean a financial flatline. The ecosystem thrives when there's balance. Don't overinvest in hype at the cost of stability. Diversify or die, my friend.
Man, esports merch can be crazier than a raccoon at a garbage buffet. Sometimes it's feast or famine. You win a couple of tournaments, and suddenly your face is on mousepads in Mongolia. But lose the next match, and those same pads might as well be coasters for a two-tooth gamer with a flat soda. Balance is key, like wearing a mullet. Your business in the front, party in the back. But if you lean too much either way, you're just another haircut.
Welcome back to those who are just joining us on Infinite Podcast. We're chatting about the esports ecosystem, a tasty recipe mixing high-octane tournaments with a sprinkle of economics. We've scooped up how esports isn't just child's play. It's layers of dough rolling in from entry fees, sponsorship deals, broadcast rights, and that swaggy merchandise. Picture this. Each time gamers go head-to-head, every action they take turns up the dial on the cash register for all involved, right from the organizers to players and investors. Been wondering why gaming gear pops up everywhere, even in unexpected corners of the world? It's because when teams lift those trophies, fans raise their wallets too. Wrap your head around this. It's not just games being played, it's a full-blown business ballet dancing to the tune of ka-ching. Stay with us as we keep unlocking the secrets behind the screens.
You've got it, Joe. The esports economy isn't just fun and games, it's a meticulously crafted dance of digits and dollars, and the tempo's only going up. With every strategic scrim and live-streamed showdown, this digital coliseum is more than entertainment. It's an economic epicenter where dreams can turn into dividends. So folks, that raises the question: what do you think the next big play in the esports financial empire will be?
That's a solid hit, Simon. The esports economy is surging with every tournament, each digital skirmish potentially paving the path to fortunes. But speaking of fortunes, there's a hot-button topic in the arena of gaming finance that we need to unpack: loot boxes. While teams strategize and sponsors scout talent, out there in the gaming wilds rumble the loot boxes, the controversial treasure troves of virtual goodies. These mystery packs might just seem like part of the online fun, dangling rare skins or powerful upgrades, but there's more under the wrapper. With real-world cash trading hands for uncertain rewards, it's got some raising eyebrows, likening it to rolling dice at a casino. So let's dive in. When is pulling the lever on a loot box just part of the game, and when does it cross into gambling territory? Is this RNG feast adding flavor, or skewing odds and checking legal bounds? Let's dig deep before the next virtual coin drop.
Loot boxes, right? They're like the notorious slot machines of gaming. Pop in some cash, cross your fingers, and pray to the RNG gods for that epic skin drop. Sure, it's a thrill, but when Junior's mowing lawns all summer just to blow his bucks on a bunch of digital maybe, it feels kind of shady. It's one thing to earn your gear by climbing the ranks, showing off your skills, but when you can cough up coin for a chance at the same goodies? Now you've got players betting their sweet loot might give them a leg up, or worse, feeling like losers left out of the club. We gotta ask ourselves, is that what we want to level up in esports?
Simon, you've hit the jackpot of controversies. Loot boxes have opened a can of worms when it comes to legality and ethics in gaming. Let's unpack this crate of facts. First off, several countries have already started regulating or outright banning loot boxes under gambling laws. Belgium and the Netherlands led the charge in Europe, classifying some loot boxes as games of chance, making them subject to gambling regulations because players don't know what they're buying. Then there's the psychological component. These randomized rewards are tapped directly into our noggin's dopamine pathways, much like gambling does. And get this, the global loot box market could exceed $20 billion by 2025, according to Juniper Research. That's not chump change. That's an industry demanding scrutiny. And finally, consider how in-game items can be traded on third-party websites for real money, blurring lines between virtual treasure and genuine banknotes. Is it setting up kids with a slot machine in their living room? There's a growing chorus claiming just that. Folks, this isn't merely a debate. It's a battlefield where virtual economies meet the very real ones, running our lives outside those screens.
Sure seems like these loot boxes are the Pandora's boxes of gaming. Once you pop, the questions don't stop. Are we letting our kids learn their ABCs in addiction, bankruptcy, and chance? Talk about a high-stakes game with rules still being written.
You're spot on, man. This isn't a game anymore when you start messing with real consequences. Kids shouldn't be learning their life lessons through risky clicks that could cost more than just their allowance. It's like sending them into the octagon without any training. Someone's going to get knocked out, and it won't just be in the game. The stakes are high. We got to figure out where to draw this line.
Honestly, Joe, I get the concern, but let's flip the script here. Remember when we collected baseball cards or hit up those gumball machines with toys inside? We didn't know what we were going to get, and it was all fun and games. So what makes loot boxes the big bad wolf of today? Is it because they're digital? Because there's a chance you might score some epic loot that's worth real dough? We can't wrap our kids in bubble wrap. Life's a gamble. Sometimes you pull a pair of socks at the gift exchange instead of the box of chocolates. And hey, isn't a bit of risk what makes things exciting? The trick is, don't let the loot box play you. You play the loot box. That's the real game within the game.
I hear you, Simon. Those childhood thrills, the suspense of the unknown. We all loved that, and sure, we turned out okay. There's an undeniable rush in taking a shot at luck, and without risks, life would be like eating plain toast every day. Safe, but oh so bland. But maybe the difference is scale, access, and stakes are higher now. That bubble wrap might not be such a bad idea when applying it to ensure financial safety and mental health. The game within the game, as you put it, that's where we got to teach the young gamers to know when to fold their cards before they're all in with nothing left to hold.
You're right, Joe. Nowadays, kids are blazing through their lunch money faster than a squirrel on espresso in these loot boxes. About time we teach them it's cool to save for an actual rainy day instead of a virtual thunderstorm made of pixels and regret.
Now, to top off the conversation with some context that we haven't touched on yet. One of the key factors contributing to the loot box legality debate is their increasing presence in games popular among minors. This leads to an overlap between gaming and potentially harmful gambling behaviors at a young and impressionable age. A report by the UK's Royal Society for Public Health highlighted this concern, suggesting that the lines are becoming increasingly blurred between gaming and gambling for children and teenagers. They've shown that about 55% of young people believe playing video games could lead to gambling. Furthermore, research suggests that kids exposed to gambling through games may be more likely to develop gambling problems later in life. Notably, The psychological mechanisms involved in opening loot boxes are similar to those in gambling. Both involve risk and reward. Countries beyond Belgium and the Netherlands are beginning to grapple with this issue too. For instance, the United Kingdom's House of Lords has called for the immediate reclassification of loot boxes as gambling. The USA has also seen lawmakers proposing bills to regulate or prohibit the sale of loot boxes to children. With such a complex intertwining of law, technology, psychology, and globalization at play, the core question isn't just whether loot boxes should be legal, but rather how the digital economy integrates these facets ethically and responsibly. Clearly, it's a multidimensional challenge with financial, legal, and moral weight hanging in the balance.
Man, we might need to issue gaming licenses just like driver's ed, young gamers navigating loot box-laden streets. Imagine this. Welcome to gambling, Gaming 101. Today's lesson, dodging pay-to-win pitfalls without blowing your mortgage by age 15. Let's keep peeling back the layers of this virtual onion, but watch out for tears, kids.
Gaming licenses, huh? Sounds like an idea worth XP. Maybe when you level up, you unlock the ability to evaluate risks. Congrats, you've reached level 18. Now you can discern between a smart investment and flushing your cash down the loot box loo. Let's not rush, though. Nobody's ready for that Surprise Mechanics 204 final exam. The failure rate would be through the digital roof.
Oh man, the fine line between gaming and gambling is getting blurrier than my vision after a 12-hour stream. Can't wait to see how this whole loot box saga plays out. Will we go full Vegas on virtual goods or hit the brakes harder than my Aunt Tilda at a yard sale? Time will tell. What's your take, folks? How should we roll the dice on this one?
Rolling the dice indeed, Simon. But hey, speaking of surprising combos, what about those wacky sponsorships in eSports? Like that time we saw a lawn fertilizer brand sponsoring a space shooter tournament. Can you picture it? Take your game to galactic heights, and don't forget to treat your garden while you're at it. The crowd's there for meteor showers, not mulch tips.
Oh yeah, because when I'm dodging laser beams and saving the galaxy, my first thought is always, did I remember to aerate the lawn? Talk about a cosmic mismatch. What's next? Forklifts sponsoring a flight sim tourney? Hey gamers, lift your skills, and these crates. Buckle up, it's zero gravity with standard pallets tonight.
Right? Or imagine a knitting needle company sponsoring the latest fast-paced fighting game. Knit your way to victory. Tighten those combos like you're purling a sweater. Picture the intermission events. Speed knit your team logo for bonus points. It's enough to make you drop your stitches. But hey, maybe there's strategy in the stitches. Call it a crafting cooldown between matches.
Haha, right? I'd love to see the gaming arena decked out with yarn balls instead of energy drinks. Between every round, players must knit one row, counting as both a stress test and dexterity drill. The ultimate battle, speed running through levels while speed knitting scarves. Winner gets a lifetime supply of merino wool and bragging rights in granny circles worldwide.
Knitting up a storm while facing the final boss? Talk about multitasking. Beating the high score with one hand, crafting a cozy beanie with the other. And at the end of the season, who's got the best eSports jersey? Hand-knitted by the champions themselves, stitched by Furious Stitch. Granny circles, you say? More like Elite Gamer Guild swapping yarn instead of game tips. Combat Crochet Crew takes on Purling Poners in next week's matchup.
Well, Joe, playing devil's advocate here, maybe there's genius in the madness. Like, ever been so mad at a glitch you wanted to punch something? This way, grab those needles, channel that rage into furious knitting. It's a new trend, therapeutic gaming. Win or lose, you've got a handmade sock out of it. And think about it, doesn't every esports hero need a cool down? What cooler way than literally cooling your PC while knitting a woolly sleeve for it? Plus, if this catches on, next time you see someone knitting, they might just be a defeated dungeon boss away from unleashing their secret final form. An esports legend, armed with yarn.
Therapeutic gaming with battle scars and socks? You're onto something, but let's crank it up. Picture this, Extreme Ironing as the next big esports sponsor. Gamers smooth out the competition while pressing their team jerseys under high-stakes pressure. Iron out your strategy with precision and steam. Wrinkled shirt? Game over. Sponsorship by an iron-making company would get a wrinkle-free thumbs up from parents at least.
You know, this reminds me of the time my cousin had a gaming tourney right in his living room. So there we were, trying to beat each other in this intense racing game, eyes glued to the screen, fingers tapping at light speed. His mom walks in, believes we could use some real-life skills during our digital showdown, and hands us a bunch of wrinkled clothes. Before we know it, it's not just about who crosses the finish line first, it's also about who can iron a shirt the fastest without burning a hole through it. We're laughing, but we're also getting oddly competitive. It was, well, heated. Who knew gaming and ironing would blend like peanut butter and jelly? Turns out, parents did. They've been visionaries of eSports sponsorships all along.
Hey, fresh listeners! You've jumped into a hilarious debate on the most outlandish esports sponsorships. We're talking lawn care during space battles and speed knitting in fighting games. And who could forget getting domestic with competitive ironing in racing tournaments? Yes, it's all about sponsors that leave us gamers scratching our heads, wondering if we're here to play or practice life skills. Stick around for more laughs and ridiculous sponsorship matchmaking, only here on Infinite Podcast.
Absolutely cracks me up thinking about these odd couple sponsorships. Next thing you know, we'll have pro gamers sponsored by a soap brand. Clean up your act and the leaderboard. It's wild out there in the esports world. So what's the funniest gaming sponsorship you've seen or could dream up? Drop us a comment. Let's keep this combo going.
Hey Simon, speaking of sponsorships, they sure bring the cash. But let's pivot to those pocketing hefty prize pools. Pro gamers are raking in winnings that rival traditional athletes, right? Yet whispers on the net hint at skewed prize distribution. Top dogs feast on steak while small fries nibble crumbs. With pro contracts now stepping into the spotlight, one wonders, are the players truly scoring their goals financially? It's high time we level the playing field and talk dollar signs and gaming dimes. What's your take on the revenue share in esports arenas?
Oh, absolutely, Joe. The money's flowing like a broken slot machine for some of these gaming Goliaths. Big names, big games, and even bigger bank accounts. But what about the underdogs? A lot of them are grinding levels just to make rent. It's a real dungeon crawler out there. This talk about visibility and contracts is great, but let's not kid ourselves. It's only level 1. If having a flashy jersey meant you've made it big, my neighbor's dog would be an esports millionaire. Jokes aside, the gap between sponsorship deals and actual player stability? More surprising than finding out water is wet. My 2 cents? Balance the scales. Let's see more support systems, maybe even a minimum gamer wage. And hey, transparency wouldn't hurt. Kind of like bringing a torch to a dark maze. You suddenly see where you could have turned left instead of being eaten by that giant spider.
Absolutely, Simon. That points to a classic boss battle, the fight for fair compensation. You see these massive prize pools dipping 7 figures deep, yet bubbling under are the mechanics and support staff barely skimming minimum wage. Plus, let's not overlook those fresh on the pro circuit. They're pulling insane hours with reflexes that put pilots to shame, and for what? Spare change? Yep, we need a new game plan. Structures in place to ensure everyone who logs into this digital coliseum gets a slice of the pie. How about basing it on level progression? The better you play, the more you earn. Not just the cherry-picked champions bankrolled by big sponsors, but every shield bearer in the arena getting their fair cut. It's 2023. Time to patch the system and save some careers from going game over too soon.
You know, Joe, this whole debate is like going to an all-you-can-eat buffet, but only a few folks get to feast, while the rest just get to sniff the roast and munch on stale bread. It's high time the buffet gets opened up for everyone. After all, it's not just one player that makes the esports world spin.
No kidding, Simon. This digital feast has got to serve more than just the AAA elite guilds at the head table. Support staff, junior players, heck, even content creators driving the hype, they all help cook this grand banquet we call esports. In traditional sports, there's a more transparent earners ecosystem, so why not here? You've got training facilities, coaches, agents, all with a clear stake in the athlete's success. But transfer that to eSports, and suddenly the clarity fades like fogged-up VR goggles. Need real talk on revenue sharing and career support. Let's get that buffet serving up fairness and opportunity, not just the odds and ends of prize leftovers. If eSports wants to level up, it's time for the industry to respawn some equitable practices. Pronto.
And you've got to admit, the prize pool split is more lopsided than my aunt's homemade layer cake. Slide off your chair if you're not careful. But hey, if we make sure that everyone gets a slice, maybe then we can prevent the whole thing from toppling over. Gamers, staff, content creators alike, let's all enjoy the buffet without anyone ending up with just the parsley garnish.
Sure, the debate's usually about slicing the cake evenly. But what if I told you that maybe not everyone deserves the same size of a slice? Controversial, right? But stick with me. The biggest names draw massive crowds. They're the ones pulling off those inhuman plays that have us rewinding clips. Surely that's worth a lion's share? Yet don't forget about grassroots players. They're the seedbed of tomorrow's legends. Can't just throw them breadcrumbs and expect a bountiful harvest. There has to be a middle ground. Reward standout performance, sure, but also nurture rising talent. This issue's got more layers than your aunt's cake, Simon. Dishing out fair shares is one tough recipe to perfect. It's not just about dividing up the spoils. It's creating an ecosystem where anyone can rise to the top tier if they've got the skills to back it up.
I hear you, Joe. It's a balancing act as tricky as walking a tightrope over a pool of hungry sharks. Big names should get rewarded for the crowds they pull, for sure. But then again, if you don't feed the rookies, who'll take over when the gaming legends decide to hang up their headsets? Keeping that talent pipeline flowing is key. So folks, what's your take on slicing this esports prize pie? Are the noobs getting nibbles while the pros feast, or is it all just part of the game? Let's chew on that.
Talking about the equitable slice of the esports prize pie, you know where else gamers are getting a big cut? The fashion world. That's right, gaming gear isn't just headsets and keyboards anymore. It's threads and kicks now. Main window slash.
Man, gamers are the new runway models. We went from snacking in our basement to strutting in pixelated pants and health bar hoodies. Who knew mashing buttons could lead to matching outfits? Power up your fashion game. Next thing we're going to see level boss neckties and platformer pumps. Watch out, Vogue.
Absolutely, Simon. This virtual gear shift into mainstream is definitely turning heads on both high streets and back alleys. But I gotta ask, which game do you think really leveled up from arcade screens to streetwear scenes? Which character's wardrobe do you see ruling the roost in this crossover catwalk?
Too easy, Joe. It's got to be Street Fighter. I mean, come on, Ryu's gloves? Classic. Those things sparked the fighter fashion trend like a Hadouken to a pile of dry leaves. And don't even get me started on those martial arts-inspired fits. They've been kicking their way into people's daily wardrobes faster than Chun-Li's lightning kick. It's game on in the fashion arena.
Spot on, Simon. Street Fighter's impact is knockout level. You've got to respect how those dojo duds have transitioned from the arcade cabinet to the coat closet. Pixel power to fashion prowess. It's a combo that wins every round.
Hey, new listeners. You've just jumped into the ring of our fashion boss battle. We're talking about how your favorite video games are leveling up from screen to streetwear. Think Street Fighter meets Runway, arcade-inspired apparel that's KOing the fashion game. It's all about gamer swag going mainstream. Ryu's gloves aren't just for throwing fireballs anymore. Welcome to the crossover episode of Fashion Combat.
Exactly, listeners. Step aside haute couture, we're now power-upping our wardrobes. It's no longer just merch. It's high fashion seeking inspiration from our beloved digital heroes. We've seen everything from Pac-Man polos to Zelda-themed zippers hitting the shelves. This isn't a niche trend hiding in the shadows like a stealth level. It's front and center, unapologetically geek chic. Fashion has grabbed the controller and it's pressing all the right buttons.
Geek chic, sure, Joe. But let's not put on rose-tinted VR goggles here. Not all pixel patterns make the cut in real life. I love me some 8-bit, but you won't catch me dead wearing a Tetris tie to a job interview. There's a fine line between fashion-forward and costume party faux pas. Some of these designers must be missing a few mana points, thinking any old game reference is runway-worthy. Let's get real, folks. Some game gear should just stay virtual.
You nailed it, Simon. There's definitely a glitch in the system when high fashion tries to force every bit of gaming iconography onto the streets. I mean, come on, who's really going to walk into work with armor like they're about to slay a dragon in Skyrim? You got to keep it real. Balance that nostalgic nod with something you can actually wear without turning into a walking meme. Keep the pixels in the game and the style in your closet, folks.
Absolutely, Joe. The key's not to end up like a misplaced NPC from the latest fantasy RPG, stuck at the water cooler while everyone's dodging you like you're throwing magic spells. Gotta give it up for the subtlety. A small Triforce pin or a sneaky Pac-Man cufflink. Now that's how you slay in understated style. Keep it cool, keep it wearable. No one needs dragon scales on their morning commute. Let's save the full armor set for the console, my friends.
Understated is the way to play it in the fashion realm, Simon. A hint of gamer glam goes a long way. Leave the full fantasy getup for cosplay conventions. Keep it sleek, guys. Game on.
Oh, for sure, Joe. Like when you're picking your character in a fighting game, it's all about the options. Picking the right piece is crucial. It's the difference between a fashion fatality and a style supreme victory. So remember, folks, those little nods to gaming, charming, subtle, that's our power-up potion for street cred. Full-blown fantasy gear? Unless you're teleporting from a magical realm into the office, maybe keep it stashed in your inventory for special events. Game over screen isn't pretty in the world of fashion.
Oh, absolutely, Simon. Speaking of balance, the gaming apparel evolution is epic in its own right. We're looking at designers deriving inspiration from 80s and 90s pixelated classics, setting a nostalgia vibe that resonates. And it's not just tees and caps. Luxury brands have entered the foray, releasing limited editions that sell out faster than a new console drop. These fashion statements track back to gaming cultures and communities where wearing your game was part of the identity. But jump to present day, and now we've gone global, with cultural icons and celebrities endorsing these lines, propelling them from subcultures to universal must-haves. What started as symbolic wear exclusively for gamers has evolved into diverse collections that embody design sophistication while maintaining their geeky roots. Remember, it's about capturing essence over excess. That's the cheat code for rocking gamer gear without crashing the system.
No doubt, Joe. We've come a long way from iron-on Mario tees to high-fashion statements. It's all about repping those digital roots with a touch of class now. That crossover is like a well-played game, exciting, surprising, and always leaving us eager for the next level. So what's next in this fashion game? Space Invader suits? Pong pong paddles? Stay tuned.
Absolutely, Simon. The creativity doesn't stop at gaming-inspired attire. It floods into the digital realm too, where personal style gets a pixel-powered platform. Take Animal Crossing. Players spend hours perfecting their avatar's outfits, showing off their aesthetic to friends and visitors alike. It's impressive how these virtual wardrobes reflect real-world panache, isn't it?
Definitely, Joe. Those Animal Crossing islands are like mini fashion capitals. It's runway on repeat with all the custom designs. It's fascinating how some folks are better dressed in pixels than they are in person. And don't get me started on Second Life. People are rocking styles there that would give real-world designers a run for their money. It's this avatar couture that's bleeding into IRL fashion choices, blending our screen time with our seam lines. Virtual vanity's shaping up to be the next big style influencer.
Sure, those digital domains offer up a style sandbox, Simon. But let's not forget the flip side. Virtual vanity can set unreal beauty and style standards. Not everyone has an unlimited closet and magic sliders to tweak their looks instantly in the real world. And honestly, not all in-game fashion is practical or affordable on the streets. It's one thing to sport a neon trench coat in Second Life, but what about when you're facing down a crowded subway? There's a reality check needed amidst this virtual style storm.
Joe, you hit the truth button right there. In-game, sure, you can rock that neon trench coat like a boss, but yank that into the real world, You're turning heads for all the wrong reasons, buddy. Not to mention the pinch on your wallet. Virtual trends can be mega cool, but let's stick with what works out here, where gravity exists and we don't have an undo button. Matching your avatar's swag? Amazing in theory, kinda bonkers in practice. Keep it real, folks.
That's it, man. In the real world, you've got to weigh style with sanity. Virtual worlds are wild. They let you test limits with no stakes. But back on Earth, you can't hit reset if your outfit tanks. It's cool to take cues from avatars, don't get me wrong, but remember there's a line, and that line is where your online persona meets the judgment of daylight and public opinion. Keep it functional, keep it you. That's the ticket.